panel is the Author's Career Toolkit, Models, Strategies, and Stories. And the purpose of the panel today is to explore basically author-controlled career strategies that will put writers in the driver's seat. So we have three lovely panelists with us here today. Based on their lived experiences, we're going to go through different phases of building sustainable creative careers. And each author is going to go through and we're going to have segments. First, we're going to talk about survival. We're going to talk about sustainability and growth. And we're going to talk about optimization in terms of readers and platforms. So the idea is basically to have this progression going from the survival strategies for writers through to how to build sustainable systems, things like Patreon and what have you, and then how to optimize those reader relationships. And hopefully by the end, we'll have a complete roadmap for authors, regardless of their current career phase. So, for those who don't know me, I'm Audrey Williams. I will be co-chairing the World Fantasy Convention here in Oakland next year, 2026. Yay! Along with my lovely co-chair, Rena Weissman of Tachyon Publications, who most of you know. I also run a lot of events. I'm a literary curator here. I work with the Afro Surreal Writers Workshop of Oakland and the Speculative Literature Foundation. I do a lot of bookstore readings and things like that. And I'll be poet in residence at BayCon. For those who are coming to BayCon, come check me out. So moving right along, I'd love to introduce our wonderful panelists. So starting with Alexander Boldizar. Alexander has been an attorney in San Francisco and Prague, a gallery director in Bali, a pseudo-geisha in Japan, a hermit in Tennessee, a paleontologist in the Sahara, a porter in the high Arctic, an art critic in Jakarta, a police oversight speechwriter, and a Times Square billboard writer in New York City. And lastly, a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu instructor in Vancouver. Welcome, Alexander.
Thank you.
Next, we have Tim Melody Pratt. Tim is the author of over 30 novels, most recently multiversal space opera, This Knife and the Serpent. She's a Hugo winner and has been a finalist for Nebula, World Fantasy, Sturgeon, Stoker, and other awards. She's also a senior editor at Locus magazine. Welcome, Tim.
Hi, everybody.
And we have the lovely Gail Carriger. Gail Carriger has multiple New York Times bestsellers and millions of books in print in dozens of different languages. She writes book hugs, comedies of manners mixed with steampunk, urban fantasy, or sci-fi, and cozy queer joy as G.L. Carriger. She is best known for the Parasol Protectorate and Finishing School series. She was once an archaeologist and is fond of shoes, octopuses, and tea. Welcome, Gail. So I do have an outline here, but we're also up for some casual convo. So we'll just play it by ear. We're going to see how it goes. But I'm going to lead us off with some questions. My thought was we're going to do about 10 minutes each, focusing on each of the panelists' strengths and experiences, and we'll go from there. So starting with Alexander. I'm calling this a survival and persistence strategies segment because we have a 25-year marathon, survival skills for authors. So, Alex, you left a lucrative law career 25 years ago in San Francisco. Take us through that decision, please, and what the first few years of that look like in terms of transitioning to writing.
Well, first, thank you for upgrading me from failure to survival. I appreciate that. No, I worked here in San Francisco in the Embarcadero Center as an attorney. I went through law school. I already knew that something was missing. I started writing for the school paper, a weekly column. Then when I started as a lawyer, I knew it wasn't for me. It was just narrowing I hated what it was doing to my thinking. It was narrowing it and making it kind of just analytic and worst case scenario. But I was naive or arrogant or idealistic, choose your adjective. I thought I could just quit and write a book and then be a full-time successful fiction writer. So I quit without having a book. I saved up about $30,000 in those 11 months. I quit. My first wife was from Tennessee, so first we went to Tennessee. Had a trailer on the lake. I had a canoe. Didn't have a banjo, but just next. That's only because I'm musically illiterate. After about 9 months in Tennessee, it was just not a place I wanted to live, and also it was still too expensive. So we moved to Nepal. Spent 6 months in Nepal. I was there when the king was killed and the Maoist rebellion started. So I was in a lot of riots. Just as a side note, American protesters don't know if you stick onions up your nose, the tear gas clears out. So that's one thing that I learned in Nepal that I haven't seen around here yet. So no public service announcement. But by being there at the right time, I started writing for the Toronto Globe and Mail, and that kind of started a freelance journalism career. From there, from Nepal, my wife got sick, so we moved to Bali. I wrote in Bali, but at the time it was very cheap, so we were living in Bali. Then we moved to New York. My son was born, and when he was born, I had to get health care. I had to get more serious about earning an income. So I got a job as a speechwriter for the Civilian Complaint Review Board, and that was it was an interesting process because the executive director invited me into for the job, and at first she said, "I only have one question for you. You're way overqualified for this job. Why do you want the job?" And I said kind of bluntly, well, it's a city government job, and I figure an 8-hour workday I can do in 1 hour, and the rest of the time I'll work on my novel. And she said, that actually makes sense. And so she hired me.
Wow.
and so, I mean, when I had to write the speeches, it was more time, but mostly it was. I could get the job done in an hour or two, and then I had the rest of the time working on my novel. And then when my son was born, that just didn't pay well enough, so I started sneaking away from that job to do a freelance writing job for Morgan Stanley, the investment bank, in their marketing department. So I was going to CCRB, working for an hour, then sneaking out, going to Morgan Stanley, working as a writer for them, and then trying to write on my novel at the same time. So it was chaotic.
Sounds like it, yeah.
But I was piecing things together. Then when my son was 11 months old, we moved back to Indonesia, and I was running an art gallery, became an art critic. I had a lot more time to write. Then we ended up moving to Canada. My first wife had a schizophrenic break, so she moved back to the States, didn't come visit for 10 years. So I was a full-time single dad. So again, I was juggling a job where I could earn some money, trying to write at the same time. But by then I was writing more and more I was still doing a lot of journalism, but I was also writing for more corporate writing just because it paid well. And that I mean, I don't want to preempt the next questions, but it was always a patchwork. It was always kind of trying to balance time to write on what I loved, which is fiction. And then, I was in recovery as a lawyer, and I was determined, get that 25-year badge of law-free. Yeah. So I didn't go back to law, but I did end up going back to the corporate world, but as a writer. And there were benefits from, I controlled my own schedule. I wasn't going up into an office, so it let me, be a full-time father and write, and to kind of just juggle schedules.
Okay. So let me ask you, you've mentioned several different types of writing. And I guess my thought is, I can imagine that informed your fiction, right? There must have been so many stories. How did that work? Did you find a lot of inspiration from these different jobs and the different international locations?
I didn't find inspiration, I think, in a traditional sense, but I learned some skills that were very useful, because I did a lot of ghostwriting. And so as a ghostwriter, you learn how to write in somebody else's style. Right. And so that was very useful in terms of becoming a lot more flexible. I think a couple of impacts. One was the ability to write in a completely different voice, to mimic whoever I was writing for. Because a lot of Wall Street writing was writing articles for people that they would put their name on.
Oh, I see. Okay.
So I would read their other articles, and I would write in exactly their tone. The other thing is, I think the freelance writing and even the corporate writing taught me how to be very economical with language. I've come to really prefer a clean style. Like if I see an MFA, there's a particular MFA style that tends to be very pays a lot of attention to the specific word choice, and is very careful with word selection. Can be a bit flowery sometimes. And so I started I think a lot of the kind of freelance writing gave me a sense for how to write in a very efficient, like focus on the story, focus on the ideas. Again, the ghostwriting and stuff, I think, helped me be able to change gears if I needed to change gears. But it taught me the value of kind of simple, clean writing that was just focused on getting ideas across as opposed to. And I'm not saying that poets or people who really enjoy there's anything wrong with it, but for me, it did shape my own writing. Like I came to, for myself, prefer a very kind of clean style.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. I mean, my first writing gigs were technical writing. And so, yeah, it's very, very different from what I'm doing today. So you mentioned in our email chat that we were having before, you mentioned that your breakthrough has been very recent. So talk to us about, like, what are you considering your breakthrough, and how did that come about?
Well, The Man Who Saw Seconds has been doing well. It's a finalist here, which was like a huge honor.
Yeah, congrats. Yeah.
Thank you. And I've had I had a Hollywood directors reach out to me, and there's a possibility of a movie.
Wow.
And so it's not nothing official yet, but I mean it's gotten far enough that I've seen Hollywood decks with famous actors in the deck, which is really, you know, it's cool to be on some of these messages with actors' names flying around.
Yeah.
I have no idea if I'm resisting myself
So
from. I'm resisting using actual names, but it's not options. They're putting a package together, so they're putting a director, actor, a package for the studios.
Nice.
And I had publishers reach out to me about my next book.
Okay.
And so it's kind of like that has been all, you know, after so many years of kind of trying to break through and going with, you know, my first press for my first book, The Ugly, was Brooklyn Arts Press, which is basically a micro press. And then The Man Who Saw Seconds is still a small press. And so to be getting inbounds from one of the big five without an agent has been, you know, it's something that I thought when I was naive 25 years ago, that's what I was thinking would happen, you know, 6 months after quitting law, and it happened 25 years later.
25 years later. Better late than never.
So survival, yeah.
Yeah. So another question, you mentioned learning marketing strategies from self-published authors, even though you yourself are not self-published. So was there anything that you wanted to say about that? Like, how did you glean insights from observing what self-published authors did?
I'm not sure I have any specific insights other than the idea that as much as I would love to not think about the business side or the selling side, like I really hate thinking about selling books, and I'd love to just write. You kind of have to, especially if you're with a small press.
Yeah.
It's just, you have to understand how to put yourself out there, how to think about the marketing, how to even, you know, I was buying ads, like social media ads, when I was losing money on them, but, you know, the director ended up, like, one of the reasons that I got that call from the director, well, she's working as a producer for this book, but was just the Vancouver Sun reviewed my book and called it, said some cinematic velocity, and I used that in an ad, and she saw the ad.
Wow.
And she called me up, and during our call, she said, you know, I have a whole team that collects IP. I have a whole team that gets IP for me, and I just came across this in an ad, and I started reading the book, and I realized it's not my genre. I don't do action. I don't do science fiction, but I couldn't put the book down, so I'm not going to direct it, but I'll produce it, and I'll find you a director who specializes in action.
Wow.
And if I hadn't taken the risk of running these ads that were actually losing me money, I was trying not to lose money. I was trying to just break even.
Right.
But if I hadn't taken that risk, then that movie possibly wouldn't have happened.
Wow.
And so it's kind of, you have to take a Bayesian approach where you try many different things that you have no idea which one will work. But you can't put all your eggs in one path, because I still can't figure out how to sell a book. But I figure if I try 10 different things, one or two will work. I don't know, maybe you guys know how to sell books. You clearly know how to sell books. But I'm at this end of the...
It's a progression. It's a progression. But no, so before we move on to Tim and Gail, was there any other thing that you wanted to share about what you found to be like helpful, like strategies, like getting through, you know?
Being a finalist for the Locus Award has been really good. No, I'm serious. I've had people... I've received an inbound from agents just because of the finalist list.
Oh, yeah.
So,
That's true, yeah.
so that it's a joke, but it's not a joke. Like it really makes a difference.
Right? Yeah. Okay. Cool. All right. So we're going to segue over to Tim. And so I've called Tim's segments Finding Your Way from Zines to Sustainable Systems. And that's because one of the things that stood out when I was looking into Tim's background is that you seem to have worked across a lot of different types. And I would love for you to just explain like all the different types. Like how do you know which is the right one? Like traditional publishing and zines and chapbooks and self-publishing. Please. Yes.
Well, I started out, in high school making poetry zines and chapbooks and stuff, right? So my ethos has always been very DIY. As for how to choose, if someone will give me a whole bunch of money and do most of the work, I will absolutely take that deal basically every time, unless there's some huge philosophical disconnect, right? But generally, somebody who's into a project, if they want to publish it, great, we can usually work it out. But I never let an inability to find a publishing partner stop me from doing something that I want to do, that I think is cool. Partly because my bar for considering something a success has very little to do with how it's received or how it sells, and more how it satisfies me as a person, as a writer, as an artist, which is why you should listen to Gail for business advice and not me. But because there are so...
I don't have to say anything. I didn't care.
Allow me to be a cautionary tale. Because there are so many ways, because you can kickstart things, you can you can self-publish things super easily now. You can find small press partners. Like for a lot of projects, I've been like, you guys make really pretty print books. How about I do the ebook and you do the print book? And in lieu of advance, you give me a ton of copies to send to my Kickstarter supporters or whatever, right? So I've worked lots of little deals like that. Yeah, I mean, if I have an idea that is weird or that my agent can't sell or that is a strange format, right, that doesn't lend itself well to traditional publishing, I will just self-publish. And I've been a hybrid author pretty much since the beginning. And I mean, my spouse and I co-edited a little zine called Flytrap for like years that we did twice a year. We always really liked being connected to that very DIY thing. And it's fun to be an art director. It's fun to hire I've met tons of great professionals, cover designers and proofreaders and copy editors and stuff, and being able to see the different parts of the publishing ecosystem from the having to run the project side has helped me understand better what's going on as an author, right? When people are dealing with my work, I now have some sense of, oh, this is what the sort of challenges that you're hitting, the stuff that you're trying to work around. So it's been valuable for me with that. But yeah, in terms of how I choose, really, if nobody wants to give me money, but I want to do it anyway, I'll just do it myself. And sometimes I end up doing quite well. Like I've had some really successful like crowdfunding projects. I've had, things that there was a period where I was doing a lot. I was doing like a Kickstarter a year, basically, for this urban fantasy series. And I really was like, feeling that the books I sold to traditional publishers were loss leaders almost, right? They were bringing an audience, right? They were getting people to discover me who would then support my Kickstarter, where I got, of course, a much bigger cut of the profits. So the landscape has changed a bit now, and also I just got a little bit burned out on doing so many Kickstarters, and I finished that series and started doing other stuff. But the landscape has changed so much now. I don't even know how I would do a crowdfunding campaign like that.
However, Patreon seems to be working out for you. Could you speak to your Patreon?
Oh, absolutely. So I just hit 10 years.
Woohoo!
Doing a story a month. I have not missed a single month on original story.
That's amazing.
Every month. Well, the reason I started it was, so I'm a short story writer. 30 novels, sure, I'm okay at novels, but like, but my first love and the thing I'm best at is short fiction, but I found myself as my novel career developed, I was not writing short fiction. If an anthology editor solicited me or something, I would write something for them, but all my attention, novels, you sell a story, you get a few $100, you sell a novel, you get thousands of bucks. So I was putting my attention into that. And plus I've written 2 books a year for like 20 years, like I would do a book for me and then I would often do like a tie-in, work for hire, whatever, first to pay off debt and then for the kids' college fund, right? So I never wanted to be just a tie-in writer, so I always made a point of writing something original every year too, but that was a lot of books, not a lot of time for short fiction. And I kept telling myself, oh, I love stories, I'm not doing it, I should make it a priority again, and then I just wouldn't. So what I decided to do was trick myself psychologically, right? If I had a deadline every month, and if I had people, even just a few people who were paying me, right, then that creates an obligation that I'm actually going to do it because I have a sense of professional pride, right? I like to make my deadlines. I like to hit, deliver my deliverables and all that. And it worked, and it grew, and it's been pretty steady. It has fluctuated between like 200 and 300 supporters, so it's not huge. But for a short story, it doesn't have to be that huge for it to be reasonable, right? Like I have always made as much as I would make selling it to a magazine. Plus, then I can sell reprints quite often, or I sell them to the podcasts and stuff like that, which also has the effect of bringing new readers to the Patreon, right? So. I did do one collection that was almost all Patreon stories. You know, it's 120 stories in 10 years. They're not all bangers. Well, and I use it to experiment too, right? I use it as a test kitchen, or if I have like a structurally weird thing or something, you know, I'll try different things, but yeah.
Awesome. So I know that you also do editorial work at Locus. So how do you balance that? And like, do these, how do you manage your time and the mental energy? And do these things inform each other? Do you get inspiration from it?
Yeah, certainly. It's interesting. My assumption was always that I would have some like crappy job in a warehouse or something, and then I would write novels. And then 24 years ago, I, you know, applied on a whim to Locus and got hired when I was 24 years old, half my life ago. And it was great. Our founder, Charles Brown, introduced me to my agent, right? Like, he actually gave me feedback on my first novel, which he did not think much of, but you know, I made it better, and it got sold. But in terms of the time, one thing Locus has been really good at is it taught me to write fast. I was always pretty fast. Locus taught me to write fast because we have a monthly deadline, right? And when news happens, you have to get, especially since we started having the website and news has to go up that day. Like it used to be, sure, you could sort of save it up, publish it at the end of the month, but now you have to go quick. And it has to be pretty professional. It's not like we're perfect, but you know, up to the minute news is never going to be perfect. In terms of timing, I work 4 days a week at Locus, so I have a day off and weekends. Some years ago, I made a promise to myself that I would not write after dark. I would at least let myself have evenings off. So I have pretty much stuck to that, except when the deadlines are very bad. But the exciting thing is I am actually leaving Locus after 24 years. At the end of November, I am going to write full time. So
Wow, that's nice.
then I expect to have time to take naps. It'll be great.
Wonderful. So before we transition over to Gail, are there any other thoughts, anything else you wanted to share?
The sort of main thing about my ethos is I will always try things, right? So new technologies and new approaches and new ways to get your work in front of people are coming up all the time. And I have never wanted to be one of those science fiction writers who said, oh God, that's strange and different, I'm not going to try that. I have tried lots of things and some of them have failed. But you know, I've self-published audiobooks, I have done interactive fiction, right? Like I've done all kinds of different stuff. I've serialized stuff with a tip jar before there was a Kickstarter, right? Like where people just had a little PayPal button if they liked the chapters I put up every week. So my feeling is if there's something that you want to do and you are hitting roadblocks and you can't get through the way that you maybe envisioned it, look for a different path. There are so many different paths.
Awesome. Thank you. And so we are going to transition over to Gail, and the title of this segment is Optimization and Reader Psychology.
Oh, that sounds very important. How exciting.
So I want to start off by introducing, you mentioned you have a system, right? You have this,
I have a system for everything.
Of course. You have this acronym WANT, W-A-N-T. That's a 4-letter. I would love for you to talk to us about the WANT
All right.
system.
There are a lot of people who talk about following your dream and no prescriptives in writing. And I am the author who will say, I'm going to give you marching orders. Ready?
Ready.
No, my marching orders are specifically if you want a career as an author. If you would like to write as your livelihood, then listen to me. If you don't, then don't listen to me. Okay? Great. Good. So my acronym WANT was developed because I started teaching quite a bit, and I developed a deck that was basically the things I wish every author knew, the things I wish somebody had told me before I stared out. And it's a whole deck, so you're not going to get it right now because I'm old and I forget things easily. But WANT is one of the acronyms that I developed for that deck, and it stands for W-A-N-T, and so the W is a website. Yeah, you need your own website, yes. One that you own, that is under your domain, that is registered to you. Yes, you do. You need it because it's the only space that you will have online. Everything else will be outsourced to a middle platform, and you cannot trust what that platform will do with you, your data, your fans' data, or whether it will exist as long as your career exists. So yeah, you need your own website. That's the first one. The second one is A. The A stands for Amazon, Author Central. go and claim your identity on Amazon Author Central. I don't care if you're traditionally published or not. All trad authors should do this, and it is a crying shame that most of them do not. It's very easy to do. You should go to Amazon Author Central and set up your account and claim your books. That is so that if for some reason you may have to leave your publisher or your publisher drops you, you at least own some real estate on Amazon, which is the biggest seller of books. Almost all of the advice I give is because mistakes were made, and I don't want you to bear the consequences that I did. The N is probably the most important one, and this is the one that I can't tell you how many author friends over the last 20 odd years have sidled up to me at a cocktail party and said, Gail, this newsletter thing. And I started to cry. Yeah, you need a newsletter. Guess what a newsletter is? It's something you write. Guess what you are? You're writers. Guess what you should be able to do at least monthly? A newsletter. Why a newsletter? A newsletter is your backup fail-safe. If everything else goes down, including your website, at least you have a newsletter. You have a newsletter that you can say to all of your readers, guess what? My website's down. So yeah, the newsletter is sort of the ultimate fail-safe. Why a newsletter? It's the only consistent thing that gets you in front of your readers' eyes that, again, isn't controlled by anybody else. You can't rely on them to come and check your website regularly, but you can show up in their inbox once a month and give them an awesome little short story or a fun time, or in my case, some gossip, a little bit of tea, and the things that are making me happy this month. So yeah, that's the N in want. And then the T is to social media platforms. And I say that because you do need some kind of outreach. And I recommend two because you want one to be the backup for the other one. And so those two should not be on the same platform, cough, cough, Meta, right? So it can't be Facebook and Instagram. I'm sorry. It can't be Threads and Instagram. It has to be two separate social media accounts. And you don't have to be super consistent on them, but just being on them and being present is really all it takes. So yeah, that's my acronym. So there it is. Those are the things, if you want to be an author, I think will certainly help you eventually have a career as an author.
My next question, first of all, you just opened up 10 more questions. I have like 10 newsletter questions now. I'm like, wait, you mean like Substack versus like other things? Like,
sure. There's a reason that I'm writing a book, you guys, because I can't keep doing this. I gotta just point you at something to read. And the newsletter section is the largest section of that book because, yeah. So the answer very quickly is Substack if you're going to write nonfiction or if you write a lot of nonfiction, and probably for poetry, although I don't hang out with enough poets, so I wouldn't want to give advice on that. Yeah, Substack. But one of the things I always think about with technology is also you should know your friends. So think about who else uses Substack and whether you want to be associated with that particular clientele and background, but also we're in California, who's programming the background end, right? So, yeah, and who their friends are politically and otherwise. So, you know, think about that a little bit.
good point. Yeah.
With your vendors and your platforms.
Yeah, great advice, Gail. Thank you. You mentioned the 4 quadrants of fandom.
Yeah, that was in our email. This is my latest theory. I have, you guys, I have a system. I have a spreadsheet. It's color coded. I have one for everything. It's very important to me. There might be something slightly wrong with me.
Are you a Virgo?
Virgo rising, don't tell. Taurus, Virgo rising. I like stuff and I like to organize it.
Organization.
Yes. Anyway. Yeah. So after I came out of fandom, I come up in fandom. Baycon was my con. It was my first con when I was 16.
Nice.
I know. I'm a baby fangirl. Actually, that's not true. My first con was like Create-A-Con for Star Trek Next Generation. But that was very long time. So I have been in and around fans and a pretty active fan myself of things that I now mostly keep hidden. But I'm interested in fan psychology and the psychology and parasocial relationships. And you guys, I had to write an entire sci-fi trilogy in order to unpack this and cope with it. But as part of that, I also started to try to think about how we as authors can relate to our fans in a way that is safe for both of us. And that allowed me to start thinking about different kinds of personalities of people who interact specifically with authors, but also with other celebrity types. And I came up with this theory. Now, not everybody falls completely into each quadrant, but some of us have a little bit of, most of us have a little bit of each quadrant. But it helps specifically if you're thinking about who you are writing your newsletter to. And when you're writing a newsletter, remember there's one person on the other side of that screen reading that newsletter. So you're writing it to one person. And so I started to think about what form that one person would take. And so I developed this theory that essentially there are sort of four main types of fans. Let me see if I can do it. All right. So hold on. You're going to have to give me a second.
That's okay.
Talk to somebody else about something.
Do.
I didn't come prepared for this. Yeah. Does anybody have a question?
We could take
divert
an
real
author question. Or an audience question, sorry.
I'll leave you in suspense.
Sumiko in the back, yes.
Yeah, so my newsletter is connected to my works, to my website, because I have work.
Good. Yes.
That's okay.
Yes. Very well done. Yeah. Your website, this is part of when, again, this book I'm never going to stop writing. Nonfiction for me takes way longer than fiction does.
Yeah.
But in the website section, I talk quite a bit about the fact that your website should have a point of view, which I think a lot of people don't like, much in the same way that your book has messages and themes and point of views, your website should be. So when somebody shows up to your website, they would like to be much in the way they would like to be in the firm hand of a narrator. They would like to be guided about what they should do next on your website. So if you have a new book out, the point of view of the website is probably to show off that new book and tell people where to get it and how to buy it. The rest of the time, the point of your website should probably be to get people to sign up for your newsletter. So make that very easy, make sure it's mentioned many, many places, and linking the two and having the sort of the domain kind of be dominant in all ways is very smart. Well done. But
So
now
you wanna
I've
make sure-
forgotten quadrant 4 still. Missing one of my quadrants, everybody.
Yes, no more questions for Gail. She's busy. No, but that's a good point though. So the website should have a clear call to action, what you want them to do, and lead them through the same way you're leading them through your book with the narrative arcs. So awesome. So, okay, I'm going to ask a different question, unless the quadrant is the quadrant done?
The quadrant's not coming, but I can do the first 3, and then maybe I'll come back around
okay.
to what number 4 is. Maybe I'll
Sure.
remind myself if I see it in my head. I'm a very visual person, which is why I work best off of decks. So the 4 quadrants are essentially, nope, that's Nosy. Okay, we'll do Nosy Parker first. Nosy Parker is essentially somebody who's interested in you and your identity as a person. This is the most dangerous quadrant because, of course, they're the ones who most easily turn into parasocial relationships. So when you're like catering to them, you give them gossip, a little bit of gossip. So, but that gossip can take the form of, for example, nobody on my newsletter, nobody online knows what I'm writing right now except for my newsletter. So if somebody asks, Gail, what are you up to? Sometimes I'll talk about it in public, but most of the time I just say it's on my newsletter. If you want the gossip on what I'm writing, you have to join my newsletter. So that's how you kind of satisfy and talk to that quadrant. You have to be judicious with them. The upside of the Nosy Parker quadrant is they're incredibly good at defending you because they feel like they know you really, really well. And so if something's going wrong in your life, like you're caretaking your father, for example, and somebody complains online about how long you're taking on your latest deadline, these are the people who will jump to your defense because they know what's really going on and they are going to protect you because you're their author. So they can be extremely useful, Nosy Parkers, as well. Then the next quadrant, which is unfortunately for us our smallest quadrant, is the collector quadrant. Yeah, these guys, girls, and non-binary persons are usually solvent, and you are probably their favorite author or one of a very few authors for whom you are their absolute favorite. And they are really interested in getting the best things first. and they are more common in some genres. Fortunately for us, science fiction and fantasy is one of the genres that has a lot of collectors.
Yes, yeah.
And it's in the name, right? They like the object, they want to show it, they want the gilt inlay, they want the, yeah. The upside of collectors is they have disposable income, and also they're quite patient. They're usually willing to wait, and they're willing to stay on your newsletter so long as they get the possibility of a luxury item eventually.
Right.
And that's how you satisfy them, with luxury scarcity items. The downside of them is because they're so excitable, you might pay too much attention to them rather than the other quadrants. And you have to be careful not to cater to collectors too frequently, because they don't represent the bulk of the market, shall we
Right.
say. So if you do too many luxury editions, you might tap out. So
Gotcha.
yeah, so and they are the ones who are like, well, you should hire a dirigible and scrawl your name across it, right? And you're like, calm down, calm down.
Sponsor that?
Yeah, calm down. So, and then the next quadrant I have to here is the patronage quadrant. This is the one that I'm forgetting, so I can't remember the specifics of that particular personality. So we're going to put it to one side, and you'll have to read the book later. And then the final one is the loyal reader. And one of the reasons I mentioned the quadrants and encourage you guys to sort of think about your fans and your readers as slightly different is because of the loyal reader quadrant. These are the ones who usually don't have a lot of time. They usually, if you write in different series, they're only going to read one of those series. There's just one that they like the best. They're on your newsletter because they're interested. You give them little nuggets of information so they can scan that newsletter easily. You break the newsletter down with headings and stuff so they can read just for the bit they're interested in. And because they don't have very much time. If you have librarians, other authors, agents, et cetera, in your fan base, they're all going to fall into this quadrant. And also, authors fall into this quadrant. And the biggest mistake a lot of authors make with their career is assuming most of their readers are also this quadrant when they're not. There are other kinds of readers. In other words, you can't treat readers like authors. They don't act the same way, and they're not predictable in the same way. This was the hardest lesson for me to learn over the last 20 years. So yeah, and they're basically impatient. Oh, right, that's quadrant 4.
Yes.
I remembered, everybody. It's because I'm talking to a bunch of sci-fi fantasy authors, because quadrant 4 often comes out of the romance genre, and it's the deal hunter quadrant. And these ones want 99-cent books. They are usually ebook consumers. They tend to be baited into signing up for your newsletter, and they want free stuff, and they want cheap stuff. And that's how you satisfy them. They're pretty easy to satisfy. Harder to satisfy if you don't have that many books or that many stories to call upon in order to keep them happy. They're the least loyal quadrant, and I recommend against cultivating them. You can, of course, but because they're so disloyal, and they like read for tropes, they read for genre but not author voice in general. So you can certainly have them on your list, and I mean, I like a bargain as much as the next girl, no diss, but yeah, I don't recommend cultivating this much, which is why I am one of those authors who doesn't recommend free first in series, although I understand it works for many people. It's because of the fans that result from that I'm the most unsure about that particular business model. Yeah, so quick back to the loyal reader. There are quite a few of them. They tend to be a pretty substantial 25%. How do I know all this stuff? I'm secretly analyzing my readers all the time, and I put them through like surveys and stuff so I can figure out which quadrant they are when they join. I know.
Smart.
But yeah, so having a newsletter, for example, or a website or a business model in general that sort of tries to cater to all of these quadrants is going to be your longest survival tactic, because then you are meeting all the different kinds of fans where they're at.
Awesome. Thank you. I feel like I just got a deep dive lesson into some, yes. We need the deck next time.
Sorry, everybody. No, because I gank images off the internet and I don't like, I want to make my decks funny and amusing. And so, yeah, the decks are never available.
Aww.
You have to find me in person, everyone.
So let's see, I'm doing a time check, 4:19. So I did want to leave some time at the end for audience Q&A, but I do have a couple more questions. I think we have time. These are some cross-panel questions for all three of you. So I noticed that in one way or another, all three of you emphasize these sort of direct direct reader relationships rather than depending totally on the algorithm, right? Or traditional gatekeepers. So like Alex, you learned this, you had some lessons, you mentioned learning some lessons from self-published authors, Tim and Patreon, Gail through the want system and all the quadrants and all the things. So is this the future of author careers, to focus on just relying on your own web, moving away from the meta, moving away from the platforms that, as you so aptly pointed out, like these aren't under our control, right? Like, is this where we're headed? Is this, right?
I want to listen to what these guys say.
I hate to say it, but I think we were always there. I think, again, I mean, this happened super early on in my career, but it's your name on the book. Right. It doesn't matter, or your author name on the book if you write under a pseudonym. It doesn't matter really what, how you're published or how you were published or any of those sorts of things. The reader is developing a relationship with you because you wrote the book. Well, usually they're developing a crazy relationships with your characters, but we'll put that into like the AO3 dungeon and move on with our lives. But it's it's an incredibly strong and powerful thing to manipulate and engender emotions in a complete stranger on the other side of that page. And they attribute you with that power. You have made them feel the thing you have made them feel, whether it is comfort or joy or arousal or excitement or fear or horror, right? It's you. And so they, as readers, develop a relationship with you, or more precisely, your name. And so it has always been a one-to-one relationship with us as the author and them as the reader. It's just sometimes those waters get muddied by the interference, mostly from others who are trying to profit off of both sides of that equation.
That's a fair point, yeah. Thank you.
For me, the big realization about the direct connection with your audience came early in my career. I sold 4 books in an urban fantasy series to Random House, the Marla Mason series. And I turned in the 4th book. I was talking to my editor. I said, are we going to do more? She's like, oh, yeah, for sure. It's doing well. We'll do some more. So I put a cliffhanger at the end of it. Then my editor got fired. And my new editor did not like me. I mean, she liked me fine, but she didn't want to continue with the series. I shouldn't say she didn't like me. We're friendly. But I forgave her. But she didn't want any more books. So then I started getting anti-fan mail. I started getting angry letters from my readers, like, you left us hanging. There aren't going to be any more books. How could you do this to us? And my publisher didn't care, right? They were getting letters too, but they don't read them. They don't care. So that was when, and I had done some like serializing stuff online, like played with some self-publishing stuff before. I was like, these people are I can't show my face at a convention, right? So I said, I'll finish up the series. I'll do 1 more book. Right? And I was supposed to be a 10-book series, but whatever, I'll do it in 5, and I'll just serialize it. I'll put it up a chapter at a time, whatever. The response was so positive, I made almost as much as I made from Random House for a book. Not quite as much, although some of my later Kickstarters, I didn't make as much as Random House ever paid me. And I owned all the rights, and I sold the ebooks, and I got all those royalties. All of it was for me, right? So that was really the thing where I was like, oh, this is the relationship I have, right? Editors will come and go, publishers will come and go, but it is about this personal relationship that I cultivate with these readers. And yeah, your fan quadrants are really accurate. I've known all of those and had interesting experiences with all of those, fruitful and otherwise. But yeah, for me, so as for whether this is the future, I mean, there are still advantages to traditional publishing for sure. Like, I often still like to go that way. I've had really good partnerships. I have come around to liking smaller advances, actually, because they earn out faster, then your publisher likes you and you still get the money anyway. Which is not to say if someone said, here's $1 million, I would say no. But, if somebody offers me less than I got, back in the day, I tend to not be upset because I have a better sense too now of how different books are going to do. Like, I can go, oh, there's a spaceship on the cover. This one will sell well. Because I have a body of work, I can kind of game things out and predict things better. It's a little bit less having no idea what's going to happen, wandering in the darkness. But yeah, like flexibility is my thing, just be willing to try stuff if one thing doesn't. I've known writers who hit the death spiral, right? Their second book didn't sell as well as their first, third didn't sell as well, and then they can't sell any more books and they just stopped writing. And that was never going to be me. I was never gonna just stop, right? Like, if you can play arenas and stadiums, that's great. If you can't, you can still be a session musician, right? You can still do the work, right? You can still be respected by your peers and produce work that you're proud of, and your readers who do wanna find you, they will still find you.
That's actually all really interesting from my perspective, being way earlier in the journey, because I've had a lot of fans. I didn't even think of them as fans. I've had a lot of readers contact me on social media asking for a sequel to The Man Who Saw Seconds, and I had no idea of writing a sequel. Like I had no plans. I'm like, my next book is a different genre.
Can I tell you what to say to them?
Please.
Don't say that. Say, well, for now, I feel like it's done, but there's always the possibility I could write more in the future. And you know who's going to find out about it first? My newsletter. And then you give them a link to your newsletter.
This woman's on fire.
I need a newsletter first, but that's happening tomorrow.
We're all writing newsletters tonight, okay? That's amazing. Okay, we're at 4:25. I feel like I should switch to audience. Thank you all. Thank you, but let's switch to audience Q&A. Yes, ma'am.
So, before your first book comes out, it's getting ready to come out, but people aren't familiar with your name yet. How helpful are things like conventions or Amazon? What do you do to make people aware that you, a person nobody has heard of before because it's your first book, exist and have something they might want? How do you do that?
Yeah, our first books came out a long time ago, so.
You want to hear it?
That's actually a really tough question, I think, for everybody with the first book. I definitely think conventions, like if you're just starting out, you pretty much have to do everything, in my opinion, and see what catches traction. And so conventions and getting your name out, and just, you're gonna do a lot of things that fail, and some of them will succeed. And from my perspective, and again, I don't know nearly as much about the process as Tim and Gail, but just having that endurance to do as many different events and things at the beginning, just to figure out where your audience is. Because if you're just starting out, you don't really know who your audience is. You don't know what's going to work. And so I think you just join, book clubs, writing groups, go to conventions. Basically try as many different approaches as you can without being stubborn as to, assuming you know which one's going to work in advance. Because in my experience, I didn't know which was going to work in advance, and then the things that worked often surprised me. Even when I was running ads, sometimes I would do very tiny ads with $1 or $2 each, and figure out what worked. I started getting really playful with it. I had some reviewer said it was a thinking man's thriller, so I took Rodin's The Thinker and I gave him a copy of my book and put that as an image, and see if it worked.
That's smart.
Somebody said it literally kept me up at night, so I took Mona Lisa, gave her really big eyes and glasses, and gave her my book, and tried that as an ad. Just images, because on social media for the ads, it's all about stopping the scroll, and you have no idea what's going to work. No matter how smart you are, in my experience, maybe I'm just not smart enough, but in my experience, I had no idea what would work. So I ran 20 ads for $1 each, and figure out which one work, and try to not go in there thinking you know what's going to work, because that was my experience.
I started being funny on the internet in 1998. I had a weblog back when we called them that. And then I was on, I was on Twitter once Twitter was a thing. I'm on Blue Sky now. I did that. And I also did the very traditional science fiction, old school approach of being a short fiction writer who then became a novelist. So I had something of an audience already. I was able to get an agent, and I was able to get attention from editors. They were interested in seeing my first book because I had already established myself somewhat as a short fiction writer. Other than that, wrote the title on the side of the covered wagon as we migrated to the West. It was a long time ago.
All right, here we go. So I wrote down some scattered notes here. I have data, chart, foundation, owning your eyeballs, and funnel. And essentially what I think I want to convey is you need to have a reason to do the thing you're doing, especially if you don't actually have a book out yet, right? And so you have to decide what that reason is. And then by that reason, I mean a SMART goal, SMART. You guys can look all of that up. It's a business acronym. Sure, you can go to convention and talk yourself up, but you don't have a business card with like at least your website on it or a newsletter or something, then why? You've wasted money going to that convention. People are just not, they're not going to remember your name and your face. That's not good enough, right? If you're running ads, you better be collecting data. You better know if those ads are effective. I would do, CTA call to, I track everything. You don't have to be as OCD as I am. I track everything via my website. So my website knows exactly who's clicking on what, where they came from, et cetera, especially if I'm running ads. And that is what I mean by a funnel. So what you need to think or conceive of is some sort of collection system for the actions that you're taking and the things that you are doing, because you're wasting valuable time where you could be writing, or you're wasting valuable money. It's always going to be one of those two things, which you should be earning, right? So all of that means that before your first book even comes out, my recommendation would be have at least a foundation in place. And that foundation is probably a website and a newsletter. Even if the newsletter is going out into the ether, what you're doing with a newsletter, even if it's just your mom and your sister who signed up for it, is you're training yourself to learn how to write a newsletter every month, right? And how to maintain a website and how to make that website attractive. And it's actually an opportunity when you don't have anything out yet to make some serious mistakes, because only your mom and your sister are going to catch them, right? Then you're not making those mistakes, because the idea of having a solid foundation in place is if it does happen, if it is serendipity, if you do hit the New York Times, if you do get Hollywood interested in you, that foundation is stable and it's ready for the wins as well as the failures and the hits and the misses. So my advice would be make sure you have a solid presence on the internet in some way. And again, I would go back to want. You can't use Amazon Author Central until you have something out there, but I would do the other three. I would make sure you have a website, a newsletter, and 2 social medias, and just be there for a little bit. If you are somebody who gets easily addicted to social media, give yourself a Pomodoro for the social media, 20 minutes. Yeah. That's all you get with an alarm. And just be there and understand it and participate in it a little bit. And if you don't like it, like I went on TikTok and I was like, oh, this is not for me. I am not going to be here. But I needed to figure that out first. But like Threads or Blue Sky, I'm like, oh yeah, you want me to write a pithy comment? Sure thing. Should I put a cute fashion shot? Great. I got this covered. Instagram and I, very friendly. Instagram likes pretty dresses. I like to wear pretty dresses. We good. So yeah, it takes a little experimentation to find your stride. And it's really healthy to experiment when not too many people are watching. And that's what you have. That's the benefit of the beginning of your career. Because it can happen quite suddenly where a whole lot of people are watching. And if you have systems that you're good at, that you've learned already, then you can at least fall back on them. So yeah. Then start doing things like going to conventions and getting your name out or whatever. If you go to conventions, though, physical items are going to be pretty important to bring with you. How many of you came here with your author business card? Show of hands. Yay! The rest of you all got Fs. Yeah, and I can talk a little bit about, I have a strategy for everything and I have a system for everything, so I can talk a little bit about why I do the bookmarks that I do and why I bring these things to conventions. But we can leave that towards the end when you can come up and collect teaching tools.
Let's check in. Any other audience questions? Oh, I see yes, ma'am.
I was just going to ask if traveling around to do book tours at bookstores, has that proven worthwhile?
I actually have an answer for this one, at least that worked for me, because there was a big difference between my first book and second book. First book, I tried to do as many as I could, and there were some really depressing bookstores where, like, I go to a city and there are 2 people in the audience. And so what I did with my second book is I only did tours in cities that I wanted to go to anyway. And I made sure I had my own, like I could fill the room. I had a network in the city that I could fill the room. So it meant I had a very short book tour. I did Vancouver, Ottawa, Seattle, LA, and New York. And I stopped. And it was my second tour felt like a real success. Like every room I went to was full. I had people to visit anyway. I either lived in those cities or I had reason to go there. And I felt way better about the second book tour than the first book tour.
Oh God. Okay. This is gonna be unpopular online. Don't everybody who's online ignore me for a second. So I did 11 book tours for the different book releases, and this was a little while ago because guess who decided not to do book tours anymore? But I always say that book tours are for authors who are just big enough to get enough people at a book tour and not big enough to say no to a book tour. Generally speaking, you should be sent on a book tour by your publisher. So it's a gross misunderstanding of how they work often. And you have to already have a big enough base and enough specifically bookstores asking for you to make it worth the publisher's while. So not everybody, it's pretty rare to get a book tour. You have to hit a certain cap to get a book tour. Yeah, you tour off the strength of your last book, exactly, and how many, again, requests from bookstores, et cetera, and how well you did at different bookstores. And they generally will ascertain where you have the most sales, and then they'll probably send you to those specific cities, if they're being smart. The downside about bookstores is book tours is they're absolutely brutal. Even if you have really good attendance, it's like 10 cities in 10 days. I've never not gotten sick off of the back of a book tour. And generally speaking, they're running the list if you're on book tour, which means you're put on tour during your debut week and then the week or two after that. And running the list means they're trying to get enough sales front end and pre-sales so that you can make the New York Times. And so what happened to me was after my last book tour, which was the second book in my third series, did not hit the list, I turned around and said, okay, can I not do this anymore? I'm officially done on the New York Times. And there are many, many reasons for that happening at that time when it did, because the lists are complicated business. But yeah, I don't love book tours, is how I would put it. And I might run together my own little one if it, and just take myself to a couple of cities that I liked with bookstores with whom I have relationships. That is the upside, is you can develop relationships with bookstores. And this is the part where it kind of sucks to be an author and an introvert, but much in the way that you should always be nice to your waitstaff and you should always be kind to the people in service positions, please be nice to bookstore people, like all of them, the people behind the till, the people who are welcoming you and saying hello, like be nice to the bookstore people. Come on, it's our livelihood, you guys. But also convention organizers and programmers. Like if you're starting in your career a little bit more, you're getting invited to cons and stuff like that, try to figure out who caused you to be invited. Because guess what? You've got a fan on the ConCom. Like,
Okay, 2-minute warning.
yeah, sorry, like go to dead dog parties. It's like, it's a thing that I developed when I was going to cons, but now I'm like, if I can make it to a dead dog, I always go to a dead dog because all of the people who have been working their little butts off to make that convention amazing, that's the place where they get to relax. And some of them are your fans because that's why you're there. So yeah, that's another big piece of advice I don't hear authors talk about.
Yeah, if your publisher is not sending you on tour, but you want to do some bookstore stuff, you just combine it with other things. You're in town for a convention, you can reach out to a bookstore. You can have your publisher. I'll often tell my publisher, hey, I'm going to be in such and such a place. Especially if I know there are specialty genre stores there, do you want to reach out? Do you want me to reach out? I've set up things that way. The advantage that it has, because even a really well-attended bookstore signing is not going to sell that many books, right? The advantage is it builds goodwill with the booksellers, right? And then they will hand sell you. They will like you. They are often convention organizers, right? They will then, all these things are interconnected. So it is a good way to build goodwill, and that's why you go. So if I'm doing other stuff, I like to do readings, so I will often be like, hey, I'll do a reading, right? Yeah, I guess that's all.
And we are at time. Thank you, everyone, for coming. Thank you, Alex, Tim, Gail. We appreciate you. Everyone go home, start a newsletter, and come get bookmarks.
First, come up and get bookmarks, especially you guys want this one if you're in the Deal Hunter quadrant, because this is a free digital copy of The Heroine's Journey, which is my one craft book.